At the end of last year, I watched a BookTube video responding to a list of 26 rules for reading for 2026 by this stoic self-help guy, Ryan Holiday, who I'm vaguely familiar with. And I actually probably going to want to make a video talking about that list at some point. But the more interesting thing about that list for me was her reaction to one of those rules that he had, which was something like, build an anti-library, a physical collection of unread books that humbles you. And so she looked at that and she said, what's an anti-library? Oh, physical TBR, and she moved on. And an anti-library and a physical TBR are sort of like opposite in terms of their purposes in some ways, but there's also like a spectrum sort of grading them into each other. And so as someone who has actually started building an anti-library, and definitely when I have reliable income again, I'm going to do that more, I wanted to talk about the difference between physical TBR and anti-library, where the idea comes from. So the idea comes from this book, The Black Swan by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who is possibly my favorite living nonfiction writer. And this is his most famous book, but everyone who is familiar with his work pretty much, including Taleb himself, says Anti-Fragile is his best book. This one's kind of famous for the wrong reason, which is something I might talk about in a future video. But in this book, he introduces the idea of the anti-library, which is based on the physical library of Umberto Eco, who, if you look behind me, you'll see I have several books by Eco there, and I have found, I don't think I like his fiction, but I really like his nonfiction, and he's an interesting person I kind of relate to. But anyways, Eco himself has 40,000 books, 3,000 in one place, 10,000 in another, as of the time that Black Swan was written, I believe. And Taleb talks about in this book, people would come, and the most common question he got was, wow, have you read all these books? And only a minority got what Taleb and Eco, and I think I too would agree, is that's not, the point of having that many books is not to read them. And my reaction at the time was the point of having that many books is to have the ability to read them. Taleb, however, expanded that a bit and also said it's also to remind you of everything you don't know, and he uses it as a metaphor for the anti-library. As the metaphor is everything that you don't know. So that is what Ryan Holiday, and I think a lot of people who talk about the anti-library get from it, is the metaphorical version. But in terms of a physical anti-library, there is still that function as well that I talked about of it is to have the option of reading these books and to remind you that these are options. So it's not just to remind you of what you don't know, but also to have the option of, oh, this is where I can look for this possibly. Or this is, remind me, oh, this is something that I know exists, but I still haven't gotten to it. So it's not just about keeping you humble, it is maybe about keeping you intellectually humble, but it's also about having the opportunity to read these books. And so I have several books that I'm going to show you to sort of, I'm going to do 5 levels. It's a spectrum, like I said, so you could divide it any way you want, but I feel like 5 is convenient for most people, and it sort of gives you an idea of shading from physical TBR on one hand to full-on anti-library just to remind you that this exists and you're never going to read it on the other hand. And I have a few books in that category. I actually have 3 that I bought deliberately for that reason, or well, one of them I got for free and 2 I got cheap that I'll talk about maybe in a future video. But for now, let's talk about, so actual physical TBR, I'm going to give 2 examples, which are, so first of all, there is this book, The Golden Bough by James Fraser, which is a well-known study of folklore. And when I was in undergrad, they had the full unabridged edition. I'm like, I want to read this. And then I never did. And this is the abridged edition. And at some point, definitively, I want to read this because it's interesting. I know I'm going to find it interesting. Even the unabridged edition, I just have so many things I want to read. I haven't gotten around to it. And I may not get to that until I retire, potentially, if ever. But the goal is, it's on my physical TBR and that I still plan on reading this. And I have a physical copy of this book that I didn't actually buy. I got this one, inherited it from my father. And then this one, The Master and His Emissary, is one that it's dealing with a lot of stuff that I've been grappling with, and one of the few people I know I can discuss books with has strongly recommended it. So this is one that I'm hoping I'll probably read this year. But again, this is physical TBR. It's a book I definitively plan on reading. So even with these 2 books, it still serves an anti-library function, reminding me, even with these books that I definitively plan on reading, I still haven't read them yet. And this one, like I said, I've been planning on reading since undergrad. and I may not read it until retirement, so it's reminding me just a lot of stuff I know I want to read. Who knows when I'll get to it, assuming I get to it. So it still serves that function. Physical TBR can serve that function, but if it's just a physical TBR, it's not necessarily going to serve as an anti-library. And then you have the books that I'm probably going to read less definitively, and if I never get to them, that's fine. So 2 examples again. This one, so Venkatesh Rao Gervais' principle I've talked about a lot. He references like half a dozen books, only one of which I even heard of, The Company Man, or Organization Man, I forget the name, but the others I hadn't heard of. And I went and I looked, and a couple of them were out of print and really expensive used, so I didn't get them. But then the ones that were affordable used, I got. And this one is, of those books, the most interesting. And as I've been thinking about Rao's essay again, I'm like, I should really read this one. It's pretty short, and it seems, again, relevant to a lot of stuff I've been thinking about. So there is a good chance I read this one this year. But I may never read it in my life, and I know that. And then you have this one, which I would like to find a partner and have kids, and if I find a partner who wants to have kids with me, I'm almost certainly going to read this then. I may read it before then because the ideas in it, even though it's focused on child rearing, have universal applicability. I mentioned Taleb's Anti-Fragile, and this is an influence on that book. But if I never find a partner to have kids with, then I may never read it, or my plans may change. And I may very well not read it until I think kids are a realistic possibility, because it is primarily about how to raise kids well, even though the ideas, I think, are universal. So both of these are books that I would probably read. And again, it's reminding me of, it's funny, because this is one about knowing how much we don't know that I know I haven't read. So it's sort of on theme, on point. Anyways, then you have the books where it is much more of a definitive maybe. And I have, again, 2 examples of this that I'm going to show slightly different reasons. So this one, Love Triangle. I've been trying to read more books on math. I find that interesting. I love Matt Parker's channel. He is a great channel. And trigonometry is particularly interesting. So when this came out, and I was still employed at the time, I bought it new. I don't know if I'll read it, but when I'm in the mood for I want to read a book about the history of math, this may be what I read. I have like at least a dozen books on that topic. And so I have it there if I decide I want to read that. But I legitimately don't know if I will. And if I had infinite time, I would definitely read it. But finite time, making trade-offs, I don't know. And this one, similar thing. This is a book that is really important, like influenced a lot of people. And I already know the central concept. And I've read the introduction. I think I've actually read a few chapters. But I fundamentally felt like, okay, I know enough of this already that it's not urgent for me to read it. And I still might read it at some point, but if I don't, it's fine, because again, I have the central idea already. I know a lot of what is in it, and I have a lot of other things I want to read. And one thing I want to talk about in future videos is that you'll see ideas come up across multiple books, which is the syntopical reading thing, and in different ways, and so you don't need to read everything that could be useful to get everything out of it. But both of these are books that I would read, definitely if I had infinite time, and I might read, I might not, but it's good to have them on hand. And then we get into books that are a little bit more, I probably won't read them, but it's, again, good to have them on hand, and remind myself also of the domain of what I won't read. And so I have 2 of these that I want to show you. So this one, I like the philosopher John Gray, who, if you look behind me there, you see a bunch of his books. And he, in one of his books, talks about the Santayana in a way that sounded interesting. But I don't read a lot of philosophy, and when I do, like, there's so much. Most people who read philosophy have like a narrow area of philosophy. I read a lot of different philosophy things. I'm most interested in ancient Chinese philosophy, probably, but I read wide range of areas. However, he sounded so interesting as a thinker that I'm like, I should get this to have it, so that if I see a reference to an essay that would hopefully be in here, I can read it. It's more convenient for me to read physical books. And even if I don't, it reminds me, he is a early to mid 20th century philosopher that I just, aside from John Gray, I haven't heard a lot of people talk about him, but he was still pretty important. And this reminds you of how much I don't know about philosophy. And the other one is also kind of a philosophy book. This guy was an 19th century utilitarian philosopher. And William James was really influenced by him. And now he's basically forgotten. And I don't like Hackett as a publisher, and Hackett Classics for public domain books are always overpriced, but I got this one used for like under $10, which is my threshold for impulse buying stuff, it was. And again, it's a good reminder that there are a lot of important 19th century thinkers who were influential on influential people who we have just forgotten. And so when I come into this room, it's staring me in the face and telling me, oh yeah, like Herbert Spencer, I haven't seen like nice published copies of his books. There's another one like this. There's a bunch who were influential in their time who now we mostly forgot. Spencer we remember, but only because we blame him for social Darwinism, and we don't remember any of the other stuff he did. And then some of these others, like, we've completely forgotten. Like, I couldn't find physical books at all, and I couldn't find them on Gutenberg, people William James referenced. These are good to have if I want to read them. And this one, again, I'm actually probably not going to read. This one, a little less, probably not, but they're both sort of probably not. And it's good to have them. Again, if I do want to read this one's more that I might read some of it. This one's I probably won't, but I might decide to, and it reminds me of what I don't know. And again, I got it. I'm like, oh, this is actually a good price because it's a used, but still in good condition for, again, I don't like Hackett as a publisher, and I don't like the Hackett Classics prices usually, but I got it used. Finally, we have the category of books that it's like, I know I'm not going to read this definitively, but it's reminding me again of what I know I don't know. And so I have one example of this. I also have 3 examples of books that I deliberately acquired. 1 I got free, 2 I got very cheap. And I got them because I'm like, this is going to remind me of something important. The book symbolically, but I'm probably never going to read it. This one, I got intending to read it, and then I sort of moved on from the point where I have a sense of what Judith Butler teaches, and I've moved on from the point where this is relevant to me. But it's still a good reminder of there are all of these academic humanities departments doing things that have been influential for a lot of people that I just am not going to get to reading. And so since I already have it, I'm keeping it as a reminder of that, even though if I had a friend who wanted to read it, I would lend it to them and try to get it back. I shouldn't lend books unless you are okay with not getting it back, but it's also, I like people reading books I like, but I also like getting my books back. But anyways, this one, again, I'm keeping to remind me this whole academic humanities stuff, there's this whole realm of it. And I know a little bit about it, like I know how influential Butler is, but there's a whole bunch of these people that I just haven't heard of but are still influential that I don't know. And then, as I said, I have 3 books that I specifically acquired to remind myself of stuff, but I'm going to make that a separate video, I think. So, again, sort of 5 levels. Getting less physical TBR, more purpose of the anti-library as a reminder of what you don't know. And so I wanted to talk about that, the history of the idea, and sort of demonstrate this with some of the books in my collection. And you'll notice all of these are nonfiction. That's because fiction, it's a lot harder for me to judge where I might feel about reading stuff in even like 5 years. I have fiction books I bought that I was definitively like, I'm going to definitely read this in the next couple of years, and now I probably won't. And I have fiction books that I got from my father, or I didn't think I read, and then I'm like, I actually want to read these now. Whereas nonfiction, my impression of what I'm going to read tends to change more slowly. So anyways, I'm Magpie. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.